McLaren win the World Constructors' Championship 2024, 26 years since they last won it. But to me, this isn't the McLaren I grew up with. It's a completely brand spanking new entity, and we're here to talk about it. Ammar, we're back
We're
again.
back. Welcome back, Shez. You missed
Oh
the end of
man.
the last race of the season. What's going on? Everything okay?
No, I watched it. I
Good.
definitely watched it. I had some views. I loved watching your video. It was great. If you haven't watched it, go watch it now. And while you're at it, hit the subscribe button too. Do yourself a favor and us at the same time. Um, I was really impressed in the end about McLaren winning the constructors title. And it's a weird feeling because I think I have criticized them quite heavily this
Don't
season.
say.
But I think justifiably they've had shortcomings when it comes to um, some of their strategy, some of their operations, and their lead driver. But from a technical point of view, the thing that I think is the most important when it comes to a team being successful, they've absolutely hit pay dirt, haven't they? Every upgrade they have brought since Miami has done something. In fact, they were doing that last year as well. So there was confidence within this squad that they were going to be able to go forwards. But I had a conversation with some friends, and they seem to think that the credit for this should all go to Andrea Stella. And that got me thinking about what it means to be McLaren racing, because this to me is not the same McLaren that won the world title in 1998. They're not even the same McLaren that won a world drivers title in 2008, right? So much has changed that the name might be the same above the door, but it's a different animal that we have right now, and perhaps we need to sort of look at McLaren in terms of the different ages that they have gone through, and maybe that speaks a little bit to our own Formula One watching history, Omar. You and I both started watching Formula One in the mid '90s, where McLaren was very much the house of Ron, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And I think one of the things, and of course, I shared this with our viewers in the aftermath of the Grand Prix itself, but I sort of had this bittersweet feeling of it, right? I was obviously rooting for Ferrari to win the constructors and obviously rooting for Charles to beat Lando. But what has been pretty amazing to see is how McLaren have performed in different eras of Formula One, right? So I know you're saying that this is not obviously not the team that Ron built or Ron's team, right? But the reality is that the sport has evolved so much, and McLaren seem to now be on the front edge, on the frontier of what this new evolution of the sport is with what we're putting in there. So I know we're going to do a trip down memory lane. And I would just say I sort of agree with the sentiment of giving Andrea Stella credit. I would also give Andreas Seidel a lot of credit too, right? Because oftentimes what you see is the look. We have this tendency of being prisoner of the moments, right, and seeing what's here and now and appreciating that. But there has been a lot of work that's gone under Andreas Seidel, and I know he doesn't have a great track record. I know what you're going to tell me. We know what's happened at Stake Sauber, Audi, whatever it is now. Um, but the reality is that these are building blocks that eventually take time. Just like with Red Bull, right? We saw them nipping at the heels of Mercedes for those 2, 3 years up until 2021 came up, and then they were able to grab it. So in some ways, you can argue that McLaren fell short of their total goals, but I mean, good God, this was a
Yeah, but yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that Andrea Seidel, I'm sorry, Andrea Stella isn't worthy of credit, but I think we need to go further back than that
back to
because
that.
this is now we are now living in the Zak Brown era.
Yeah,
This is very much a team that has Zak's fingerprints all over it. He is CEO, and the decisions that have been made that have led us to where we are right now are his decisions,
yeah,
essentially, right? And and I do want to go back a little bit because, as I say, this for me is now the third age of McLaren,
right.
right? Because the second age was the Ron Dennis age. I think there are similarities in the way that these two personalities have come along, and they define the team that they run. As I say, the name above the door is the same, but the stamp that's on it is very, very different. And yet they came into it in a very similar way. So this really is a trip back down memory lane, right? So 1980 is when Ron Dennis took over McLaren. They were doing really, really badly. It was still the same team that had been founded by Bruce McLaren in what I guess you could call the first age of McLaren, right? This is a Kiwi driver who founded McLaren in the UK, and it was being run essentially by an American called Teddy Mayer, um, and his associate Tyler Alexander. And they'd had some success. They won the world title with James Hunt in 1976, and then they didn't. But then after winning a couple of races the following season, they didn't win anything. So then in comes Ron Dennis, and Ron Dennis came in with he's not an a top technical guy, right? He started off as a mechanic on the literally on the shop floor. Something that if you ever read anything about Ron Dennis, he doesn't like being reminded of. But that's where he started off. But he built up a team in junior racing, and he brought in loads of people. This is a hallmark of both him and Zak. They bring in the right people and they make those decisions. He brought in John Barnard, who was at his time the greatest Formula One designer there had ever been at that point, right? Um, he brought in um, Nicky Lauda. He brought him back out of retirement in 1982. He brought back Alain Prost. He hired Ayrton Senna. In his time, he got Gordon Murray in. These are all things that he was doing to build his team. And he was a sponsorship guy as well. It was a marketing man's dream. He would fly out to places and market what he was doing. He was able to get Porsche in to build engines. He was able to get sponsorship from Tag Heuer. That's how they got their Porsche engines. And that relationship that he had with Tag was there up until the day Mansell Ogier unfortunately passed away. When you marry that up with what Zak Brown is doing right now, Zak did the same thing. He walked into to McLaren in 2016 when they were still blaming all of their problems on Honda engines, realized there was a problem. And then you have to look at the timeline of decisions that he has made since then. Do you remember what the 2018 McLaren looked like?
It didn't look great. I know that. I have to sort of juggle my memory, but
It was plain. There was zero
there was
sponsorship on
nothing
it.
on
Do,
it. That's right.
do,
That's
do you
right.
remember? It
Yes,
had
yes,
Fernando Alonso's
yes.
Kamoa sponsorship, and it had like almost nothing else,
That's
right?
right.
And look what he's done to the portfolio of McLaren. We make fun of them now because of the number of ad spots that they
Sponsorship.
have on
Yeah,
their car,
yeah.
and that's what Zak Brown is good at. That's his stamp, isn't it? His before he took over McLaren, he was the founder of Just Marketing International, the biggest motorsport marketing agency in the world. Like his whole shtick is to get sponsorship. So he's seen what needed to be done, right? And it was ironic that McLaren had been brought to their knees because of Ron Dennis, but when you've built something that big, you just don't want to let it go. But Zak was having to unpick a lot of that, and it was the decisions that he has made that has stamped his authority on it. The getting rid of Honda and bringing in Renault to wake them up so that they knew it wasn't just the engine that was causing the problem. Getting in Seidel, getting in James Key, realizing that they were a problem, getting in Mercedes, finding the investment for the wind tunnel and the driver and loop simulator, and then eventually getting in Andrea Stella, bringing in Rob Marshall, creating that technical structure that empowered them, and then being able to step back to let the people that know what they're doing do the work. That's very reminiscent of what Ron Dennis did when he brought in Adrian Newey. Okay, he meddled too much, but he did allow Adrian Newey to at least build some stuff. And it's that I'm seeing in McLaren right now. I'm seeing that
Well,
renaissance, that resurgence, that old that old school team CEO, team principal kind of
Des,
model coming back again.
I think that you're 100% correct, but I would also argue that what Zach Brown has done is setting the standard for McLaren in this day and age, right? Everything that Ron did, he was ahead of the curve at that point in time. What Zach is doing now, you could argue, is similar in that regard, but also you look at the peers he's up against, right? And they're great role models. I mean, Mercedes had a run of success largely for some of the same things that you talk about with Zak Brown, with Toto Wolff. He kind of has some similar back. They all have a different palette of strengths, if you will, right? Not each of these team principals have the same strengths like Zak Brown does. Toto has his own strength being, sort of, and then Christian Horner kind of also being a former racer kind of thing. But look at what he has in common with these other successful team principals. It's about recognizing the strengths and weaknesses within your organizations, finding the gaps, filling those gaps with, as you just said, with the right people, letting them be what they are good for, and not micromanaging, not meddling, something that Ferrari has been guilty of at least up until the Fred Vasseur era. Um, is just really a hallmark of his leadership. And now that we're discussing this more, I think the credit for McLaren's comeback largely goes to Zach, because as he just let us know, I don't know if it was a couple of days ago or a week ago, he said that McLaren were on the brink of sort of shutting down their Formula One
in
operations.
2020.
Look
Yeah.
at what's happening at Alpine right now. I mean, they're going through, I mean, they are a storied franchise too, right? So you don't have to look too far for examples. And I know not all of them are equal in the way things play out, but in the scope of 10 Formula One teams, soon to be 11 Formula One teams, right? This is pretty amazing. And let's not forget, when this season first started, not one of us gave McLaren a chance or would have put them even in the top two teams that would be, let alone winning a championship, right? And not up until Miami did we actually even feel like there would be a different change, right?
But they seem to have confidence
But
in
they seem to,
themselves,
right?
right? And
And
and there is something in that. So when you're comparing the McLaren structure to other team principals, Zach to other team principals, there's a key difference here in that he is a CEO who is front and center. He has a very defined job. My job is to bring in cash and to put the right people in the right places within the team. And then I'll step back and I'll keep doing my
right.
job, my
Yep.
commercial job, and the technical job is done by somebody else. And you compare that to somebody like Toto, right? Toto Wolff has a presence in the garage. He is a CEO and a team principal at the same time. That's a
Sure.
lot to manage, right? Fred Vasseur is a team principal, yes, but his CEO, um,
Jordan.
John Elkan, is in the background, not up front and center. He's there to make certain deals happen, but the running of the team is done by um
Right.
by Fred Vasseur, right? Zach Zach, I think, has a different remit. Like John Elkann still answers to Fiat and his bigger bosses, and sure, Zak Brown still answers to the bosses of John Marsh at the McLaren Group. But he has what he has built himself, right? It's not Andrea Stella that's done that. It's not Andreas Seidel in the past that did that. They're the people that he has put in place and are now doing a good job because he has put them there.
Yes,
And that I think is distinct from every other
absolutely.
um,
And
Formula One team
that's why I
currently.
said that what he's doing now, what Zach has done, is now reset the gold standard on this, right? So your previous gold standards, for the reasons that you just described, could be Toto Wolff, could be Christian Horner too, right? I'm not saying that again, these are to some extent these are apples and oranges the way we're comparing them, but look at the theme here, right? There's a clear strategy, there's a clear sort of defined structure, there's a clear way of communicating, there's a way of making sure that information is shared across the board in a manner that it aligns with a common goal. There is hustling that happens, right? I mean, Toto is known for that too, right? I mean, yes, it's all different in some regards. And Zach is a great fundraiser, great getter in terms of advancement and money management operations. But at the end of the day, Shez, we can all boil this down to outstanding leadership. That's what this is. And these teams that have had success, and I think this is so true for Formula One teams because their success is so cyclical. And at the hallmark of all of these successful teams is a great leader at the top. I'm not saying that drivers are not responsible. Of course, you get those once in a
Yeah,
lifetime drivers, and
yeah,
they're all there. But we all know if you put Max Verstappen in a Haas, he's not going to win anything, right? It doesn't matter, right? I mean, so you do recognize, and we're talking about that too, is what Zach has done is completely unique. And I think a step above in how he's sort of doing this. He has learned from what everyone else around him has been doing. But really, Shaz, I think we have to kind of go back to resurrecting this team. I mean, this is a team in the crapper, right? I mean, a decade ago, like we didn't even. I mean, look at Fernando Alonso's comments from his McLaren's time. I remember radio messages year in and out. I mean, he would say things like, "Well, we shouldn't even be competing in F1. We should be an F2 or an F3 team, something like that." Those kind of things. I mean, to fast forward to now, this year, they're actually beating. Both, I mean, you can argue maybe Red Bull had a downfall, but they also beat Ferrari. I mean, this is
Yeah,
amazing. So,
yeah.
I think kudos to him, really.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you're completely right, and it is about structure, and it is about how you harness that. So right at the top of the season, when Adrian Newey was talking about leaving Red Bull, and then he finally left, what I said was that the Newey as an individual brings together a lot of different facets of Formula One. Like he brings aero, mechanical, race engineering all together into one person. So he can talk at an expert level to people from all of those areas. But nobody else in a Formula One team has that because that's not the kind of graduate that that universities are creating now. You get someone that's very specialized in one area and they come to your Formula One teams, that means that you get departments that are disparate and can often not work together. It's a problem that I think Mercedes had under Mike Elliott, that the different departments didn't talk to each other, and that led to the problem that they ultimately had, where they had a slightly disparate car. What Zak Brown has done with his appointments and allowing Andrea Stella to headhunt the people that he wants. Um, is that they have created a technical structure that rivals Red Bull without needing an Adrian Newey like figure. It's so balanced at the top in terms of the lines of communication. It's horizontal, isn't it, between Rob Marshall, Stella, Peter Prodromou, all of those three guys that head up the technical department there. Um, they all feed off each other. It's a circle. It's a round table rather than a boardroom, and that's what allows them to work. And I said at the top of the season that I think if you're gonna beat Red Bull without Adrian Newey, you need to have a technical structure. I think McLaren, the team that have that technical structure that will allow that to happen. That's what's played out, and that's Zak Brown doing that, isn't it? That's him putting the building blocks in place and allowing that team to flourish to do the things they need to do.
What they built is complete harmony, right? And look, when we were talking at the height of Adrian Newey leaving Red Bull, and someone you might recognize said that we didn't want to bring someone who would upset the apple cart. Well, I would turn to Zak Brown and McLaren as an example and say, look, you don't actually need Adrian Newey to beat Adrian Newey or an Adrian Newey less team. You do need to have pieces that fit together. I mean, again, I think at the heart of success of any
I,
of these
I mean,
teams,
you'd
they
still
have
take Adrian Newey if you could, though, Mar.
it's still there. I mean, but come on, like I mean, if you could do that without him, it can be done, right? So, look, multiple routes to success, right? But it's at the end of the day, it's recognizing how to fill in gaps and build a formidable team, and they've got the structure now. And then with the new wind tunnel, I think that we can start to raise the expectations and raise the bar on what they can do going into certainly next year. I think they'll be hands down favorites, and then of course we'd have to see what happens in 26 onwards. But I'm also like this is slightly tangential, right? But I'm really glad that McLaren have come back to this fight because going back to our time starting to watch this sport, it used to be McLaren and Ferrari for the longest time. I mean, even for that, if you want to take 2008, I'm sorry, 1998, all the way up to 2008, 2008, 2009 is sort of when they started to fall off, right? For that decade too, it was Ferrari and McLaren for the most part, right? And I would argue that that was sort of the golden era in some ways, especially in sort of recent memory. Now it's of course taken over by Max and Lewis and everything else that Red Bull has done. But I'm really glad to see for McLaren in the mix, and I think the one good thing that we get as Formula One fans is evidently there's going to be three and probably four teams next year fighting for these championships, and it's going to be amazing. And I'm so glad McLaren have made it to this party early because next year we're going to see fireworks from them when they have their two drivers going at it to win the drivers' championship, in addition to winning a constructors too. So. I'm really happy to see them back and be here and look so good, look so promising. I think that's the takeaway, really.
Yeah, there's definitely a certain nostalgia in watching this play out. I don't think it's going to last. I think Adrian Newey. Well, I just think Adrian Newey will start to.
But Chaz, this
Um,
this is a warning shot for you and Adrian Newey. I know what you're going to say, but you're expecting Adrian Newey to come into Aston Martin and then all of these things to just sort of fall in place.
yeah, mate. I mean,
And one
the
that's
problem
nature, man. It
is,
takes time.
yeah. I think
You
they'll
thought
turn
you
up in
want
20.
Lance Stroll to be world champion like
I don't
before
want
Lando
him.
Norris, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, like and I don't know.
I don't want him to, but I do think that Adrian Newey brings a certain something to a team, and his track record is unmatched. He has never failed to win a championship of some sort at
Give us
every
hope.
team that he's been at, other than Leighton House. So, I mean, what more do you want? Um, I do want to move on a little bit because there's one other facet of McLaren's World Constructors Championship. Um, that is really interesting, which is that they did it with a Mercedes engine in the back.
Yeah.
They are not just de facto, they are
Congratulations to
a
Toto Wolff.
pure customer. They are a proper customer engine,
Look, I mean,
customer to Mercedes. So how has that happened, Ammar? Like, how the heck have
I don't know
McLaren done
how it's
that?
happened, but congratulations to Toto Wolff. And maybe Alpine are going to join the fight next year. Who knows? Listen, I mean, look, again, this, now, I mean, do you really want to? I mean, we've had this discussion in the aftermath of what Alpine decided, right? Whether McLaren should take over their sort of operations there with the engine making element of it. I don't know. I mean, look, we just gave Zak Brown a lot of credit for making the right choices. One of those was to go with the Mercedes engine. So
So I do have at least a small bit of an answer to this because I do find it ironic that the team that have won the Constructors' Championship with a customer engine is McLaren because it was Ron Dennis in 2014 who came back to McLaren as a CEO on the back of the fact that he was saying that, look, I've got Honda engines and you cannot seriously win a constructors title without Honda engines. He brought in Eric Boulier as his team principal at the time, and Eric Boulier carried on saying that he didn't want to get rid of the Honda engines because he was like, look, you might be able to win the odd race, but you're not going to win a title without without a works engine deal. And Ron had this to say in 2014. I find this fascinating because I still think that what Ron Dennis said at the time is true for that time, but things have changed. But this is what he said. He said, um, my opinion, and it's an opinion held by many other people within our organization, is that you have no chance of winning the world championship if you are not receiving the best engines from whoever is manufacturing your engines. So that is true. Absolutely. If you do not have absolute engine parity, then you're at a disadvantage. But the rules around Formula One have changed, and Andrea Stella was talking about this. He was talking about how the rules at the FIA have allowed a customer team to win a constructors championship, right? In that, as recently as 2017, you could, as an engine manufacturer, supply to your customer a year-old engine, right? That's what Sauber were running around with in 2017. They're running around with a year-old Ferrari engine. But that's all changed now. So you can either have the whole engine and gearbox, which also means that you have to take the rear suspension on as well, but McLaren haven't done that. Um, or you can just take on the engine and just have the power unit, which is what McLaren have done. But you have to get the same engine that the manufacturer is producing. It has to be the same power unit, same spec, the same engine modes. That I have to say I didn't realize that you have to have the same engine modes as the manufacturer. That means that it actually now doesn't make financial sense necessarily to build your own engine. So I do look a little bit
Unless you're
at
the
Red
tech.
Bull powertrains and go, what are you guys doing?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't know. Maybe. I think there might be a little bit more complexity to it than just that. I think there might be some inherent advantages of building your own engine that might.
so those inherent advantages, I thought about that as well, but it turns out that McLaren have an input, however small, into the development of the Mercedes power unit. So they have a direct line to Brixworth to say, have you thought about this? And that then gets fed back into their own car and their own package. That's quite an advantage
Yes,
to having a big
just
money
having an
saving, isn't
input
it?
doesn't equal that the outcome ends up being what you want it to be, right? I mean,
Yeah, it does. But it does if what it results in is the best, most drivable
sure.
power unit on
Yeah.
the grid,
Yeah, but I
right?
don't know. I mean, it would take a little bit more for us to decide the sort of the delta between having an input and then actually being able to design the whole thing. Like, what is it? You get 10% input, 5% input. What does that mean in the grand scheme of things?
I mean,
Doesn't even matter.
but yeah, but the thing about this is that the proof has been in the pudding, hasn't it? I have also been guilty of being a little bit of a works engine snob. That I talked about this when it came to Alpine. I still think they've made a mistake, but the fact that they've gone to being a customer
Yeah,
team, um,
that might also be an
it might
economic.
work in their advantage, couldn't it? Like the fact that McLaren have shown that with a good technical structure and a good understanding of how your package works, it doesn't matter what donkey you've got in the back, as Martin Brundle would put it.
Well, I think that's just it. Sometimes you might be, sometimes less is more, no? So if you're a team that is not capable of, I mean, look, managing all of this is also something, right? Mercedes is a powerhouse for a reason. Ferrari are a legacy powerhouse for this. Red Bull are in this transition, so it's TBD, right? But these two teams, they are huge outside of the sport too. So it's not easy. I mean, look, if Cadillac comes in and eventually has their own engines, I can see that working out because they have a whole apparatus behind making engines that just someone like Red Bull who's just starting will have inherent disadvantages just because they're so new to the game. So
But
I think that what McLaren have done actually, Shez, makes a lot of sense because they have said, look, we are going to do a few things excellently versus trying to do all the things,
everything, yeah.
everything nicely or sort of be mediocre at it. And that's the formula that's worked. Now, Shez, I think one thing we need to add in all of this is right. McLaren have been successful, but Ferrari only finished what is it, 14 points behind them. So this wasn't as clear cut as you would imagine. Like, look, if the results were flipped, what would we be saying about McLaren today? Would you look at all of these same things in that same
Well,
light? It's close
I,
enough,
well,
as
I'd
close
say
as
that.
such a title can be. So
Well, I'd say that they still managed to get
absolutely,
close to a championship without an actual works engine deal, which actually hasn't been done since 2009, right?
but it has been
So
done. So I mean,
by
it has
who?
been done. It hasn't been done since 2009, but it has been done. It's not unheard of.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But it's not the norm,
Yeah.
and perhaps we are getting into. Look, I take your point about Ferrari, but they didn't win it. They
No, they
they
didn't win it.
they had a big
My-
fat wobble in the middle of the season, and
sure.
they didn't win it. And perhaps there is we're reaching a certain point in Formula One history where it's not so much about being able to integrate your chassis and your power unit, but it's being able to optimize what you can optimize and then find the best package and having the choice to do that because with the best will in the world, Mercedes and Ferrari are never going to have the opportunity to shop around and say, well, actually, maybe um, that power unit is better because their boards would never allow it.
They have their own.
Alpine have somehow managed to do this, which I find incredible. But from a marketing point of view, what Alpine have basically said is that Renault can't build an engine.
Yeah. Well, but again, it may not hurt their Renault's overall goals and objectives, or at least they've made that calculation right now.
Yeah.
I think that what you're seeing now is that the sport has evolved to a point where we are seeing convergence, right? by way of all of the regulations that are coming in, by way of the cost cap, by all of these things. So to a
Mm,
certain extent, you are going to see that gap being narrowed. And by virtue of that, I think again, you could make, if you're McLaren, if you're even Cadillac F1, right? They've decided to go with Ferrari as of recent news, but you could make the case, well, do we really want to invest so much time, effort, money? I mean, there's a financial component to this also, right? Beyond being competitive, you have to have additional staff. You have to, I mean, all of the overheads that come with it. Should you can just say, hey, look, engine is a big part. Let's just go out and get the best engine. Let's figure out everything else on our own. Boom, there we go. And then we can invest that time, energy, and resources and finances in all of that. And clearly, McLaren have found a way to do that. And look, this is a formula that might work. I mean, this should give, if anything, this should give a lot of these other sort of middle of the road teams like Williams. They would be one of those teams again where you could see them resurrecting themselves given their past history, and if they can be smart about and go out and raise money. I don't know that James Wells is the same as Zak Brown. They probably need someone who can be that sort of fundraising monster, if you will, and really not just that, even put the team out there. I mean, you've seen so much about McLaren now that in terms of just being in our space, in our minds, that you wouldn't have seen before too. So there's an element. Those things all add up, right? They're all small things, but they add up really quickly. So
yeah, that is a good point. I think the convergence point is is salient. 2 points about that. The first is that Williams should be looking at McLaren's model and thinking, well, if they can do it, we can do it.
you do
Like
it.
we don't have to have our own works engine deal. If we've got a Mercedes engine in the back of our car, we should be able to do what they are doing. Their structure is different, though, isn't it? In that James Fowles is the de facto TP and CEO. He makes all the decisions and runs the team day to day as well. Zak Brown doesn't have to do that. He's got someone that runs the team for him, and he does all of the commercial aspects himself. So that separation of power, the separation of church and state, means that
Sure.
you know that whoever is suited to whatever they're suited to do best gets to do that job, and that's what makes McLaren powerful at the moment. But the other thing about convergence is that there's been an engine freeze since 2022, and whatever reliability or minor performance upgrades that have been added to each of these cars, they go to every customer team as well. So McLaren will get all of the upgrades that Mercedes have put on their engine, all of the reliability updates, all of the anything that they've put on there, software updates, engine mode updates, all of those, they will get them as soon as Mercedes get them. That's why I think this is a bit of a turning point for Formula One, right? You don't have to be tied into a worked engine deal. You just need to be able to have the availability of the best engine possible. And
Right.
that does perversely put teams like Ferrari, Mercedes, and now Red Bull with their powertrains
Yeah.
at a slight disadvantage. Red Bull have put themselves in that position because nobody wants to supply them an engine because they're just
Yeah,
they're
put
you
you
know
in that scene, Honda might come back, you know.
well, Honda will come back, but if Honda supply
That's what
Red Bull an
has.
engine, but again, it will be a customer supply, but maybe that's not a bad thing.
No,
Who
I
knows?
mean, look, I think if anything, I mean, even teams like Haas might have a shot at this because if again, if you're one of those other teams outside of Ferrari and Mercedes and even Red Bull, right? That's what you want to be looking at. You want to look at the McLaren model, not necessarily McLaren themselves, but I think what Zach has done, and I think you're absolutely correct. This is a real opportunity for a team like Williams, Shez. It would be nice to sit up here and talk about how Williams have made a comeback too, right? Given their rich history and all that they have meant to the sport too. And even a team like Alpine now, they all have a shot. So I think that in the end, the sort of the big picture of this is McLaren have led a resurrection of themselves, but in the process might have even just added another layer to the sport itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe in a way we should give credit to the FIA because whatever they did a few years ago, just this has kind of worked out. I don't know if you give Jean Todt credit for this or Mohammed bin Saleh, but it certainly
It won't be MBS. It'll be Jean Top
Jean
because all of
Todt.
these changes was talked about sort
Right.
of 2016 onwards, wasn't it?
That's
At a time of great collaboration between the FIA and FOM, something that we do
right.
not have right now, and perhaps is the subject of a future video. But on that bombshell, Ammar, I think
Yeah.
we've reached a fairly profound conclusion there
Yeah.
that that perhaps Formula One has changed and that we're back to teams like they were in the 70s, running around with Cosworth DFVs, um, and winning championships. Perhaps we are back at that point in Formula One again, and I am for it. I love it. I love to see teams that don't necessarily historically have the resource do really well. So, and that is credit to the FIA and F1. That is a bombshell to end this one on,
That
isn't it?
is a bombshell. Yeah.
As usual, please like, please subscribe. We're getting ever closer to 930 subscribers. It is our next aim. Please help us get there. Please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one and we will reply to as many as we possibly can. And you know that we do this because we can't keep out of the comments. We will see you guys in the next one.
Later.